Hi, today I was working on an interesting example trying to represent this sentence in the semantic representations, and I thought I'd share it with you because it's really quite intricate. So it says, everyone who does what is wrong is sinning. Okay, now, this sounds perfectly good as an English sentence. But what's the problem in our system? Okay, the problem is that our meaning for wrong is to be incorrect. So that's not really the meaning that's intended here. It really means everyone who does something that is bad is sinning. Now, I have a rule, an explication in terms of simple words for to sin, and the explication is to sin is to do bad, the sense of bad, which means morally bad things. So I could write this, everyone who does morally bad things is doing morally bad things. But that's what we call a tautology. It doesn't mean anything. It's not giving you any new information. That's totally obvious. Why is it that in the biblical text, it's not a tautology? It is giving us useful information. The reason is because sin is a technical word to do something that violates God's righteousness or God's commands. But we don't necessarily have that technical term in the target language. So how are we going to get around this? Well, what I decided to do was to use two things. First of all, I'm going to use a different explication for to sin or a sin. So we have another explication as a sin noun is a thing or action that God hates. So that's expressing the idea that it's something that's abhorrent to God, which is a good representation of sin. So what I decided to do is write it this way. We don't have everyone, but we can use all people who do. Now, if I write it as bad underscore morally things, it could come out all people who sin are sinning. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. Our explication for a sin, one of our explications for sin noun, this is our second explication. Explication is just an expression in terms of simpler words, is a bad morally thing. So normally we write it that way with the adjective in what we call the attributive position, directly modifying the noun. So you have an adjective noun, that's attributive. The other form of an adjective is predicative. So you say, John is morally bad. That's the predicate position that you can form with the verb to be. So all people who do things, so what I'm going to do is make this in the predicative form, who do things that are bad morally, are doing things that God hates. Okay, so because I wrote bad morally in the predicative position instead of the attributive position, this will not convert, at least I hope it won't, into sins. So the if this does not convert into sins, but this does, and then doing sins converts into sinning, then the complex version that our rules could create from this would be all people who do things that are bad are sinning, which is exactly what we're trying to represent here in the original sentence. But if we don't have that complex term, sin noun, and sin verb, it would come out all people who do things that are bad are doing things that God hates, which still is a pretty good representation of this sentence. Okay, so that was an interesting case I looked at today, and by fiddling with the exact way you write it and using two different explications, I was able to represent the meaning of this in such a way that it comes out either in the simple version or the complex version, depending on the vocabulary of the target language. And thank you for listening today.